Hi, my friends. I was going to make a video for my current Heal What Hurts students, but what I want to talk about, I just think that's relevant beyond the current group. So I decided to make this a public video. We're working for 8 weeks with our emotional triggers, and it's a gradual process of getting more and more aware of what's going on in the energy field of the body. And we do that by noticing our breath, because the breath is often the first thing that changes when we're triggered. It's like there's a contraction in the energy field of the body, and we can't breathe quite right. We might become skilled at kind of masking that, but we know it inside of ourselves. And so we want to really have an awareness of our breath, practice breathing every day, some kind of breath practice where it becomes very obvious when that very early kind of indicators there that something is up, because then we can okay, I'm observing what's happening. I want to be with myself. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not checking out so that I can't be the adult in the room with myself or with the other person. So that's number one that we work with. Then we work with scanning the body, like really being in the body. And that we hear that so often with spiritual practices, but it's like work. It's work to sit and scan and be in the body so that you develop sensors. So if I were to say to you right now, close your eyes and feel your breath inside your nose. You don't even have to close your eyes, but you immediately feel it. And a moment ago, that was still happening. You were still breathing, but it was not, you were not present to it. And obviously, you don't have to feel every breath as it moves in and out of the body. But I would say that we have to return to feeling a lot more and being a lot more sensitive. Little kids tend to be a lot more sensitive, right? If you were to give a little kid alcohol, for example, they would get really loopy, or there's special doses for kids. And yes, it has to do with body size, but it's also a level of sensitivity that we abandon as we meet the world and as we become hurt in different ways. We develop kind of techniques for not feeling, well, I'm not feeling that, well, I'm not feeling that. And then it's this unprocessed emotional contraction energy in different places in the body that carry a charge, because the story and the experience that's sort of held in that energy hasn't gone anywhere. It's like an undigested piece of food that's just sort of lodged in a part of the energy system. And then something else will happen in our life that reminds us of that. And then that's sort of that compounded reaction where we're not just reacting to, the boyfriend not texting us in a timely manner. We're reacting to not being picked up from daycare when we were 3 years old or something like that. And I mean, that can sound so ridiculous, but it really isn't, because the feeling in the energy field of the body is as visceral as, we've all seen very young children get hurt, and how they just feel it with their entire energy system. I live sort of diagonally here in St. Paul from a little preschool, a French immersion preschool. And on Mondays, which is like the first day after the weekend, you can hear that the kids are more distressed. They're little, they're like, I don't know what you are in preschool, 2.5, 3 years old, something like that. And they're wailing, and it's just, there's so much distress of being separated from your caretakers after being home with them for a weekend. I'm of course trying to understand what's happening, and I might not know the whole story, but I'm just hearing the distress, and sometimes I'll sit quietly and just pray for them and send them love. And I'm sure the caretakers over there are doing all they can to soothe all these children. But it also just reminds me of how often we might be in that state of feeling separation or anxiety or fear, and it's just being stuffed. And I'm not saying we should wail like a 3-year-old, but we should recognize the sensation inside the body. So my group that I'm currently working with, they've now gone about halfway through the 8-week process. So they're becoming more aware. It's becoming more obvious when you're triggered, and what your method is to deal with that trigger. And for most of us, before we start working with a trigger, we choose one of three outs. And it's really good to be aware of, hey, what is your out? Like, how do you, kind of leave yourself really when you're triggered. A typical out for a lot of the women I work with is to lash out. It's to want the other person to change. And not doing that doesn't mean, I'm not saying that there isn't something that needs to change in your partner. You may have even picked a partner that specifically doesn't do that thing because it reminds you of how you were treated as a kid. But leaving that aside, the attempt to make somebody else do something different so that we don't have to feel what's sort of lodged in our energy system, it only works so long. I mean, you might have somebody who really tries to kind of walk on eggshell around this certain part of your psyche, but eventually life is going to kind of force us to realize that this is in there. So the second out is we numb out, and most adults have a method for that. Early on, it's often kids that get sugar, right? So a kid is hurt, you give them a sucker. Not everyone does that, but sugar is often like the reward if something is hurting. And then once we become adults, alcohol is kind of the socially acceptable thing or method to not feel something. Another out is to just check out, to become cold, to become kind of in your head, I'm not feeling you, I'm not feeling me. So it's not, don't mix that up with checking out as in, I need space, I'm going to leave, I love you, but I need to just take a step back and just feel what I'm feeling and process that before we have any more conversation here. Checking out is more just becoming this cold, numb person, and which is really painful for the other person, but it's also very painful for the person who does that. So as you become aware of what your out is, it becomes way easier to observe yourselves, like, oh, I'm busy pouring a glass of wine, let's put that bottle down for a second and just see what really happened inside myself. And then once you realize I'm triggered, I'm not going to do one of my three outs, I'm going to be with myself. It's not like, well, then you got it made. No, then you have to actually sit with that pain. And that's hard to persuade people to do because it is so uncomfortable. You feel so vulnerable. You feel contracted in your body, in your throat, in your chest, in your stomach. It's showing up somewhere, and it feels like a straitjacket of your own energy that's kind of compressing your breathing, and it feels like there's nothing you can do to release yourself from it. But the thing is, just sitting with it and loving into it and imagining light, the love of God, your own divine loving presence, holding it and being with it and breathing through it, continuously feeling the breath, visualizing the light, doing that, holding that was probably not done when you were a kid, when that initial samskara kind of was lodged in there. Once you've done that for an hour, is a good amount of time. Maybe you can't stand it for that long. You always feel better after. It's like something has just released, or like a pus is coming out of a boil and then it's gone. Sometimes there's tears, and sometimes there's not. Sometimes just the sitting with it, as excruciating and uncomfortable as it might be, if you don't budge and just decide, I am sitting here with this, I'm envisioning God's love in my body, surrounding the places that hurt, and I'm not moving, I'm giving this part of myself this love, just being with it, just breathing through it. And then you get up after, and all of a sudden it's like a dam of energy has been released, and suddenly the things you couldn't get done, suddenly it's easy to get it done. Your body feels better, your appetite is back, or you don't feel like eating crap or drinking crap. So that is my huge encouragement to my group and everyone who's interested in the Heal What Hurts process, to give yourself an hour to be with yourself instead of doing one of the three outs. Maybe there's another out I haven't thought of. And look on my website, mariatoso.com, and check out the Heal What Hurts process and what it could do for you and how you could plug into it.